Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. On this Marvel Contest of Champions video, I'm going to be talking about relics, specifically how over the past 10 days or so I have been able to test the current batch of relics on the CCP Beta server. I had somewhat limited time to test these, but I did go pretty deep into 3 champions with 3 specific relics. Essentially, the way these relics work is you can bind them to a specific champion. As long as they match the class of the relic, they can go, and at the very least, you get a striker that's going to be able to extend your combo. And then additionally, if you have some of the RPG elements that this relic is going to augment, you can get some additional abilities that can increase your damage, your tankiness, etc. And it really depends on the relic itself. So, the main thing you need to know is that you get a striker and you just have to match the class, but there are some very interesting interactions that were sort of intended with these relics, and I tried to pick 3 champions that I thought sort of had a variety of skills and abilities in the game that would benefit from these relics. And those 3 champions that I looked at, and you'll see in this video in the background today, are Carnage, Sorcerer Supreme, and Wasp. Respectively, they are using the Venom relic, the Scarlet Witch relic, and the Ant-Man relic. So before we get into some details, I want to first talk about this striker interface. They definitely improved this since when we first beta tested strikers. Specifically, the button itself is a little bit larger. It's a little bit better placed so that you don't accidentally hit the special button instead of the striker button. I think just intuitively, I was more in tune with how it would get filled and when I could chain it onto my combo. And I also feel like the duration and the kickback from the stun that you get at the end of it is a little more intuitive. So I was just finding it to be a much more enjoyable and mistake-free version of the strikers that we first got, and I was having fewer input issues than when they first came out. It is important to note that the stun, the opening that you get at the end of the striker animation, is not a debuff, and it is also technically not a stun passive. It's just kind of its own thing that's like a striker opening. So this is not succumb to stuff like debuff shrugging or limber or even stun immunity. So if you're going up against stun immune champs, you are going to be able to use this relic stun to extend your combo, and I really like that they did that. One more thing to go over before we get into the specific relics is that up on the display, you'll notice that there is a new symbol for effects related to relics. We're used to the active debuffs and active buffs as well as the passives, which don't have the border. Now we have this new hexagon logo, and that simply means it's an effect from the relic. You do need to read specifically because some of these are actually considered active buffs or active debuffs, but they do have the sort of hexagon shape so that you know it's an effect on the relic. It's going to be something that we all have to get used to and take a look at, and another thing to keep track of in addition to all the buffs and debuffs and timers that we're already keeping track of. But generally speaking, when you see it, you know that an effect has gone into place and it is probably buffing up your character. So now to specifically look at the Venom relic and how it's affecting Carnage, there's a few things that we need to know. First of all, there's the ability of the striker itself. The last hit of the striker is going to put on a bleed vulnerability debuff, which is going to be increasing the potency of future bleed debuffs. Additionally, because my Venom relic is duplicated, it has what's called the innate ability, which is similar to a signature ability, and it's that for each unique buff on the champion, it inflicts an indefinite bleed vulnerability debuff, increasing the potency of future bleed effects. So additionally, basically our bleeds are going to be hitting harder due to this relic, especially when we cast the relic itself. Now, every relic has what's called 1 ability slot and 2 attribute slots. As the names sort of describe, an ability is like a new thing that the champion can do, whereas attributes are just sort of tweaking the stats. The one that I have on is called Ravenous Strike, and it's for each unique buff on the champion. Bleed debuffs inflicted by hits landed against a bleeding opponent gain longer duration and ability accuracy. Now, this is really important for Carnage because he is going to be having bleed up for the entire fight. So what this means is that essentially as you continue to put the bleeds, it's going to have additional duration. And if you combine this with the Deep Wounds Mastery, you're basically going to be doubling the effect of the Deep Wounds Mastery. It's just going to be more and more bleed damage. It really works well for him. Additionally, the attribute slot that I have is that when Fury, Precision, and Cruelty are on, the buff potency is increased. So that's always nice because I have all three of those buffs. And then additionally, the other attribute slot is just a flat bleed potency increase. Now, I wanted to showcase the full synergy team here. We have 2 Carnages with Venom, as well as the Symbiote Supreme, or excuse me, the Spidey Supreme, the new character. So that's going to increase the total amount of buffs that we can have. Additionally, we have the Red Goblin synergy, which allows us to double up on some of these buffs. So this is a supercharged Carnage. He's going to be able to take down the Star-Lord in Labyrinth of Legends with 3 million health in just 2.5 minutes. It's pretty incredible. The thing I have to say about this, though, is that Carnage is still very much lacking in utility. His main sources of utility is power gain and unblockable specials, which basically are just ways to stack up the damage already. So adding even more damage to that is really fun. However, I'm not sure exactly how relevant that's going to make this character. I would assume that the Venom relic is going to be more powerful on champions like Venompool or Venom himself, who are a little bit more relevant in the current meta of the game, and who will also benefit from the things like the increased buff potency as well as the increased bleed potency. And additionally, their Cookin timers and their symbiote timers can be shortened slightly with another ability slot. So the reason I put Carnage in here is because while it's a complete blast and it's really fun to watch, I do think that he's an example of someone who perfectly fits the abilities of the relics, but I'm not sure is going to be making like a new dawn in the contest as one of the best cosmic champions. However, if I do get this relic, I'm certainly going to bond it to Carnage because he is one of the most fun characters in the game to play. And additionally, we're trying to have fun here. I would like to have fun in the game, and a souped up Carnage like this would definitely be a way for me to have fun. Next up, we're going to look at the Scarlet Witch relic, and while the Carnage one was, like I said, a perfect match of relic and ability set, yet I wasn't sure how relevant it would make him, I think that this one takes it a step further because Sorcerer Supreme is already a pretty awesome champ. We've seen her a lot in Alliance War, and she always comes up when you need a Mystic Nullifier, but she really benefits from this relic. In fact, she is by far the best recipient of all of these abilities from this Scarlet Witch relic. I do think, generally speaking, the Scarlet Witch relic is the most limited in the champs that you can use it on and have the most effects with, but she is clearly one of the better ones. And I do think that it actually makes her hit hard enough that it makes her a more valuable champion to have with the relic than without. So getting into this relic, when you throw the Scarlet Witch Striker, the first hit is going to grant an Amplify buff, which increases ability power rate. So the slow, steady power gain that you get from these Sorcerer type characters is ability power. So the fact that you're gaining more power is always nice. Additionally, the innate ability is gaining a bar of power while not attacking. So that means if you cross a bar sort of with a passive power gain, then you're going to get increased special attack damage. And we're going to just see some really big specials against this Winter Soldier in this fight, and all of these things are working together. The additional things that I added in the ability slot is that when you activate a blessing, anytime that your passive changes between the damage or the tanky phase or the power gain phase, then you are going to be also getting one of these amplify passives, and it's going to increase your ability power rate. So that's always nice. There is a slight healing option as well, but I found it wasn't necessary because I kept finishing at 100% health anyway. And then the other two abilities are increased special damage and increased armor break potency. For a character like Sorcerer Supreme, these are really going to make a difference because to stack up damage, you want to be throwing specials in your attack phase while their armor breaks up. And in order to do this, you need to be sort of keeping track of your runes and make sure that you always have the armor break one up, but it is really going to magnify the special damage. And this is a character we're going up against that isn't really proccing buffs and doesn't have anything that she punishes, but we're noticing that the Amplify is giving us access to lots of specials, almost as if we had Mystic Dispersion activated during this type of fight. And additionally, the armor breaks and the additional special damage are definitely noticed. If you took her up against, know, like a super scroll or something, like one of her best fights in Alliance War, I think we would really see this, you know, with the Mystic Dispersion and the buff punishing and everything, her being a complete monster. So I really, really like this relic, even though it's somewhat limited. I think if I get it, I would certainly attach it to Sorcerer Supreme and be pretty happy with it. So now that we've looked at two relics that are sort of like perfect matches for the abilities, we're actually going to take a look at this Ant-Man battle cast on Wasp. And now, according to Kabam, Wasp is not one of the ideal placements for this relic. They said Ant-Man and Yellow Jacket would work a little bit better. However, I do think that Wasp, even though she's a secondary option, does benefit from this relic a lot, and we're going to go over why. First of all, the last hit of the battle cast is going to be putting on a power sting, so that's just an additional source of damage. It's pretty nice. And then when it comes to this innate ability, basically when a power sting debuff deals damage to the opponents, then you're going to be basically getting like a fury, an attack rating increase, and this lasts for the entire fight. So we see that after the first set of power stings go, that number 6 shows up in the hexagon. That's just, you know, 6 increases to our damage. 6 is the cap. At least at this level of relics, so that means that we just have an attack bonus. So if you scroll back and you look at how hard my heavies were hitting before that activation, they were significantly less, and then now, you know, the crits off the heavy are hitting for almost like 3,000 more crit damage on the second hit, I think. So it's pretty awesome to see just like a flat fury that lasts for the entire fight when you have that innate ability unlocked. Additionally, there are lots of ways that you could go for Wasp, but the ability slot that I chose was called Twin Stinger. Basically, it doubles the amount of power stings, so you would normally get 3 off of the special 2, and we're getting 6, so that's double the damage. You could also inflict a taunt instead. That would obviously reduce the damage that you take by a little bit, which for, you know, for Wasp, making her a little bit more tanky is nice. Additionally, taunt mixed with power sting is always nice, but I opted for the maximal damage. Getting the 6 power stings instead of the 3, I think, was the way to go. The other 2 attribute slots that I picked was reducing their special attack damage, just making her a little tanky. She obviously doesn't have a lot of health, so if I did have to block any specials or anything like that, maybe not applicable to this specific fight, but generally speaking, if you have to block specials, that's going to reduce the damage. And then the other ones you can choose for are, you know, power sting debuff potency, which I would highly recommend. And the third one that you can swap in is power sting duration going up, which is also pretty nice. In fact, I would probably put that on over the special damage negation that I had, but overall, most of my power stings were landing and everything worked out great. Now, the reason I really like Wasp for this is, first of all, you get the additional power sting when you use the striker. You're just getting a flat damage increase, and because she has guaranteed crits off of her shrinking into the heavy like that, it really just is a noticeable amount of damage when you have all those big yellow numbers. And then finally, she's a sort of a flow champion where, you know, you want to be chaining your combos into the heavy anyway. I just found having a striker made her even more enjoyable to play. You could be doing 5-hit combo into the striker, into a 4-hit combo, into a heavy. It was just like, I felt like an endless barrage of hits. She always had power, so I was baiting specials and not making that much contact. Wasp is just one of those characters that enjoys landing lots of hits and chaining her heavy already. Having the striker on top of that was really enjoyable. So hopefully you can see how this is a slightly different example. She is not one of the most intended uses for this relic. However, I do think she is one that gets one of the most benefits out of it. And if I do get this relic, I'm most certainly going to be pairing it with her. Now, we didn't go over the Thor relic as well as the Hulk and Juggernaut ones. Certainly, the Thor relic is an absolute beast mode for Angela and just about anybody who has, you know, Furies and Precisions and things like that. It's really going to be amplifying the damage. Even Cosmic Ghost Rider gets a pretty substantial benefit from it. It's almost like having the aptitude on the entire fight. So, you know, obviously that one scares me a little bit, but we'll see how it ends up getting tuned in the end. The Hulk one seems pretty interesting. I would want to try it out on Overseer and Red Hulk specifically. Making them better, they're already so good, would be pretty interesting. And then the Juggernaut one, we've already seen some interesting things on Karate Mike's channel using Rintra, making him even more tanky with that vitality. It's pretty wild. So there's a lot going on with these relics. We only looked at 3 of them specifically, but definitely search YouTube because I know a lot of other YouTubers tested out some of the other ones specifically. And with that, we're going to come to some concluding thoughts now. So overall, I just want to kind of talk about the impact these might have on the game. Certainly, I think that what they are doing, at least in my testing, is they're taking champions who are good, sort of above average champions, and it's making them a little bit more relevant. The question, though, is are people going to want to do that to their sort of like average champions and make them very, very good? Or are they just going to attach a battle cast to a champion like Hercules or Doctor Doom just so that they get the benefit of the striker, longer combos, and maybe some marginal benefits? Because at the end of the day, like we saw with Carnage, he was really fun to play, but I don't think he's going to be a game changer on people's accounts. Maybe you can make an argument for the stuff like Rintra and, Angela making their way toward the top of the contest ratings. But overall, I just think these are going to be more fun than impactful. If we're talking about game modes, I do think that incursions are probably going to have the most impact because there's already so many wacky interactions with hacks. So, especially since incursions are not like a head-to-head competitive mode, they're sort of like a grindable mode that you can do with a partner or by yourself. I think this is going to be a massive benefit. People are going to have more variety and more fun interactions there, which is going to be pretty fun, and people should hopefully be able to get better rewards if they have champs with relics as well. When it comes to battlegrounds, it's a little difficult to say. I've heard some people say that relics are going to be necessary to compete there, and I do hear that argument. Essentially having like a 10-hit combo plus the 3 hits of the striker is like having a 13-hit combo. That can be enough to like win a battlegrounds match if it was going to be otherwise a tie or a loss. The thing I have to say to that is so many of these metas have some form of power gain or some form of evasion in them that I'm not sure having a long combo is necessarily a way to win. Obviously, you have to counter the meta. And for example, if I'm going up against dodge, I'm not doing 5-hit combos anyway. The same thing with flow or power snack. So, just having a longer combo doesn't necessarily mean you win. It might mean that you have some different options in your deck if you can have some of these relic enhanced champions. But overall, I don't think having as many relics as possible is going to equate to being the best Battlegrounds player. I still think a lot of it is going to have to do with game knowledge and skill in the fight. Now, when it comes to ranking up these relics and acquiring them, it's sort of been said by some other content creators and by Kabam that when we first get them, expect them to just stay at rank 1. They are going to have a separate form of currency that's sort of the equivalent of Catalyst and ISO, as well as regular old gold to rank up. My question is, how are you going to be able to manage these sort of Catalyst type materials? Is it going to be a whole other thing you have to farm, or is it just going to come naturally in the game? I think I would have rather seen this be like when we had the 1-star symbiote that could be, ranked up by just like a single item, like a single Clintar catalyst. I think that would make this a little more streamlined instead of having ISO and Catalyst. But at the same time, I'm assuming they're going to give us ways to get this just by playing the game in the way that we already are. And with that, I just want to give my last concluding thought that a lot of people seem concerned about the complexity that this is going to bring to the game, as well as them being paywalled and being out of reach by certain players. But, the thing I would say about that is just if you're managing to keep up with your immediate peer group, whatever that is, if you're trying to maintain a certain prestige or maintain a certain amount of rank 4s or something like that, and you feel like you're hanging in your alliance, you're probably going to still be in that same bracket. Like you're never going to catch up. You're probably not going to get that far behind. But however they make relics available, it's probably going to be in the ways that you're already playing the game. If you're already playing Battlegrounds and you made it to the Gladiator circuit, then you're probably going to stay there. And you're probably going to be able to get some form of relics, maybe not as fast as somebody who is pushing harder than you or has a larger wallet than you. But at the same time, I don't see people getting super far behind just because there's a new feature. Just like champ acquisition and champ rank up materials, you sort of stay within your bracket if you play to that level and you spend at the level that you have been. So just keep that in mind as these things get rolled out, that of course, there will be people who can spend an unlimited amount of money, and they will probably get some stuff first, or a little bit faster, or a little bit more efficiently. But also the fact that these are going to be in the gladiator circuit, which is hopefully, if they get the modders out of the way, a skill-based thing. We will be seeing some of the top players in the game getting some relics and being able to feel rewarded for that. So hang tight. We don't have a lot of information about these yet. I will say overall they are quite fun, and I enjoyed them. I will definitely be trying to get relics onto my account just because it's some interesting variety. I'm going to try to not be too anxious about, acquiring them and ranking them up, and I would recommend that to you as well. And that's going to do it for today. If you have any questions for me, feel free to leave a comment. I do appreciate your support always, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Have a great day, and I'll catch you in the next one.